Maddie and her older sister Holly sat at the dinner table eating supper with their parents as they did every evening. As seemed usual in their home, Holly liked to dominate the conversation, telling their parents about her day at school and how well she was doing in every class. "So Mum, today in biology Mr. Hartford said I'm on track for one of the best marks he's seen on our individual coursework." "Oh, that's great, sweetie, I'm really pleased for you," replied Mum, seemingly proud of her daughter. "And can you believe it, in the child care course they even had these massive baby dolls and they made us show that we knew how to change a diaper. I mean, why do they need to teach us how to change diapers, for God's sake?" "Well, you never know, love, it might come in handy one day, maybe if you have children of your own." As Holly carried on and on, Maddie found her boastfulness increasingly annoying. She had finally had enough and just couldn't help but say something. "Jesus, do you ever stop talking about yourself, Holly? I'm fed up with you going on and on about how amazing you are at everything." "Maddie, don't be so disrespectful and rude to your sister. All she's doing is telling us about her day." "Yeah, Maddie, what the hell is wrong with you? Are you're jealous of me or something?" "That's right," Mum sighed with her. "Of course, she's too perfect to ever do anything wrong." "Stop being such an immature little brat, Maddie. You're 15 years old, not 5, for God's sake. You're acting like a baby," replied Mum angrily at her daughter's immaturity. With that, Maddie ran off up to her room in floods of tears, feeling utterly worthless and inferior at how her life was compared to her sister. 18-year-old Holly had always been seen by everyone as the perfect girl, regularly achieving higher grades than Maddie and having a much larger group of friends thanks to her good looks and outgoing personality. But Maddie didn't see it this way. To her, she saw Holly as boastful and full of herself, always going on about how she had done this or done that. Maddie felt fed up with living in her sister's shadow. After Maddie's little outburst, she had gone up to her room on her bed to sulk. Lying there, she felt angry at Holly's arrogant response and how Mum had even defended her. These thoughts stirred in her mind as she laid there on her bed feeling worthless and upset, and soon, despite it only being 6:30 p.m., she drifted off to sleep. She awoke a few hours later needing to pee. Looking at the clock, she was shocked to see it was now 2 a.m. and that she had slept through the whole evening. Due to it now being so late, everyone else had gone to bed. She got up and quietly made her way to the bathroom. As she walked past her sister's room, she noticed her door was slightly open and she could hear Holly was asleep. She thought about the evening's events and how much she hated her big sister when suddenly an idea popped into her head. Part of her was saying it was a mean, nasty thing even to think about doing. The other part of her remembered what had happened earlier in the evening, and how much hatred she currently felt towards Holly. She quietly went downstairs to the kitchen and got a large plastic bowl, which she then filled with warm water from the kitchen tap. Maddie then made her way back upstairs and very slowly snuck into her sister's bedroom, observing that Holly appeared to be in quite a deep sleep. She put the bowl down next to her bed and gently lifted Holly's hand, being careful not to wake her, and placed it in the warm water. She stood and waited. After about 2 minutes she was about to give up, having convinced herself it was a stupid idea that would never work, when all of a sudden she thought she could hear a faint noise. She listened closely as she began hearing a hissing sound from under the sheets which got increasingly louder. Gently lifting the duvet, her jaw dropped. She saw that Holly's pajamas were now soaking wet and her bed was soaked. She couldn't believe it, her trick had actually worked. She had somehow made big mature Holly pee her bed like a baby. Now who's acting like the baby? Not quite so perfect now, are you? Maddie thought to herself. She left the room with a massive grin on her face, not quite able to believe that she had just somehow made her 18-year-old sister have a bedwetting accident. She now couldn't wait for the morning to come around. As Holly woke up the next morning, something felt strange. As she shifted in bed, she realized something wasn't right. Around her bum felt cold and uncomfortable. As she put her hand under the covers, she realized her pajamas, underwear, and bed were all soaking wet. "What the fuck?" she said out loud to herself. She pulled back the covers and stood up. Feeling around her butt and across the front of her pajamas, she felt disgusting, as she came to the realization of what had happened, that she had wet the bed. "No, I can't have. How the hell did this happen?" a frustrated and upset Holly asked herself. Examining her bed, she realized there was no hiding the massive wet patch and that she would have to quickly take her sheets and pajamas down to the washing machine if she didn't want anyone finding out. As Holly was about to do this, Mum walked into her bedroom. "Is everything alright, Holly? I heard you shouty." Mum was cut off as she noticed her daughter's soaking wet pajamas. "Oh my gosh, what happened, sweetie?" You don't know, Mum. I woke up like this morning," said an obviously upset Holly. "Oh dear, it looks like you had a bit of an accident, love. Don't worry, we'll get this all cleaned up." Holly broke down in tears. Maddie woke up and could hear a commotion from her sister's room. She got up and went to her sister's room, hearing her mom's voice from inside. She barged the door open, finding Holly stood crying wearing soaking wet pajamas. Mom was trying to console her. "Oh my god Holly, you didn't pee the bed did you? I didn't know you were still a baby. Get the hell out of my room," scowled her angry and upset sister. "Please can you go out of the room Maddie and let us sort this," asked Mom. "Okay Mom, I'll leave you to help the big bedwetter." "That's enough of that Maddie, your sister's certainly not a bedwetter, this is just a one-off thing as she's probably just got a virus or something." Maddie felt really pleased that she had managed to humiliate her usually perfect sister as she went off to get ready for school. Holly was rather quiet come breakfast time. Maddie held herself back from sniggering, knowing Holly wasn't in the mood. The day went by without incident. Holly tried to put the accident to the back of her mind, convincing herself that it was just a freak occurrence that would soon be forgotten. Maddie, however, had got too much satisfaction from Holly's embarrassment to leave it at that. That night Maddie stayed up late, yet again sneaking into Holly's room. This time within just 30 seconds of Holly's hand being placed in the warm water, the 18-year-old began soaking her bed for the second night in a row. She couldn't believe how easily it seemed to work on her sister at her age. In the morning, again she heard talking from in her sister's room as Mom had gone in to wake her up, her oldest daughter finding her upset yet again over a wet bed. This time instead of barging into Holly's room she stood outside with her head against the door and listened in. "Honey, don't worry, we'll book you a doctor's appointment today to find out what's going on." "Okay Mom, but can we get this cleaned up quickly? I really don't want Maddie to find out I did this again." "Yes okay sweetie, can you just take your wet sheets downstairs and put them in the machine for me before you get ready?" Yeah okay," said a blushing and upset Holly. With that Holly quickly made her way downstairs to the utility room and put her wet stuff in the washing machine. Maddie stood back around the corner so that she couldn't be seen as she watched her pretty older sister go downstairs carrying her wet sheets, still wearing her pee-soaked pajamas which were clinging to her well-toned butt. Maddie went downstairs only a few moments later, timing it perfectly to catch Holly trying to hide the evidence of her second bedwetting accident in a row. Holly looked shocked to see Maddie. "Morning Holly, hey, how come you're doing laundry? I've never seen you do laundry in the morning," questioned Maddie, hoping to embarrass her big sister. You caught off guard, Holly stuttered, not knowing what to say. "Oh my god, you didn't wet the bed again did you?" Maddie saw her sister's face turn bright red. No, I just spilled a drink." Maddie walked up to Holly and pulled the sheets out of the washing machine. "Ew, they stink of pee. Oh my god, you actually wet the bed again. And look at your pajamas, they're soaked, that's freaking disgusting." Holly felt totally embarrassed having her little sister catch her trying to hide her the evidence of her bedwetting accident, all whilst still wearing her pee-soaked pajamas. "Maddie, just shut up and go away. Like I said, it's only because I've got a virus or something, so don't even think of telling anyone about this." "Sorry Holly, I was only joking, I didn't really mean it. I hope you get better soon." Maddie lied through her teeth, pretending to show some concern for her big sister. Inside she was loving every second of having something like this over Holly. Mom was shocked that her usually mature daughter had suddenly now done this not just once, but 2 nights in a row. It was that last thing she had ever expected from Holly, especially now that she was a second-year college student. She feared that if it kept on happening anymore that Holly's mattress would be ruined and may begin to smell. Maddie had made her mind up that she would do it for another night as she was enjoying having a feeling of control over Holly for the first time in her life. It was somehow making her feel much better about herself. That night, sneaking into Holly's room at 1 a.m., seeing her sister was sound asleep, she lifted her hand into the bowl of water. Just as she placed her sister's hand in the water, Holly began moving and lifted her hand. Maddie completely froze on the spot, praying to God Holly hadn't woken up. She soon realized Holly was just moving in her sleep as she saw her roll onto her side. As Holly turned, thought her bed seemed unusually loud and kind of like it was rustling, which intrigued Maddie. Upon feeling the corner of the bed, she found that Holly was, believe it or not, sleeping on a rubber plastic sheet. She couldn't hold back a smile at this finding. Her 18-year-old college-aged sister couldn't currently be trusted to have just a normal sheet on her bed like anyone else her age. She now had a crinkly plastic sheet on her bed, something you would normally associate with small children and toddlers that couldn't yet control their bladders, and we're still not out of nappies. Well, you may get higher grades and be more popular than me, but I'm not the one sleeping on a mattress protector at the age of 18, Maddie thought whilst chuckling to herself. After finding out about Holly's new bed sheet, it made her more determined to make her wet her bed again. For the second time that night she placed her older sister's hand in the bowl. Sure enough, after about a minute of Holly's hand being placed in the water, Maddie heard a trickling noise as her sister's bladder began emptying its contents, again leaving her nice and wet for when she woke up. The next morning Maddie decided to and Holly were sat at breakfast, now both ready for school. Maddie broke the silence. So did you manage to stay dry last night or did you have another accident? Firstly Maddie, don't talk to me like I'm some little kid, don't forget I'm 3 years older than you. And secondly, no, it didn't happen again, it was like Mum said, probably just a virus or something I ate which I'm over, okay, so don't ever mention it again. Well, I hope it doesn't happen again, Holly, let's hope you stay dry tonight again. Just shut up, Maddie, and stop being so fucking condescending. I'm not a kid, just 'cause you're jealous of me being better looking and more popular than you. My god, you better not even dare to mention this to anyone ever. Her sister's words had hurt her deeply, but Maddie tried to think positively. She loved this feeling of having something like this on her sister and could see just how much Holly was struggling to deal with it. She laughed in her head at the thought of the crinkly plastic sheet her big sister now had on her bed, which instantly made her feel better, imagining if only Holly's friends knew what their popular classmate now slept on. After the nasty way Holly had just spoken to her, Maddie decided it would be fair payment to keep going with the hand in warm water prank. She continued it for the next 3 nights. Each time, the gorgeous college girl had been distraught to wake up finding that she had wet the bed yet again, which she desperately tried to keep from Maddie. She had got better at hiding her accidents, which in her mind she thought she had managed to keep hidden from her younger sister. At breakfast, Maddie, knowing full well that Holly had now wet the bed 6 nights in a row, played innocent and questioned Holly. So Holly, have you had any more nighttime accidents since the other day? Was I not clear when I told you to never mention that again, Maddie? And the answer is no, because it was just a one-off as I was unwell, which I'm over now, so stop being such a condescending little brat. Have you got that? God, you don't need to be such a bitch about it, I was just asking. Well, don't stop speaking to me like I'm some kid, okay? I get it, you've always been jealous of me 'cause I'm better than you at everything, and a couple of accidents changes nothing, wart fingers. Maddie hated when her sister called her that. Ever since she was young she'd had trouble with warts on her hands, mainly on her fingers. Holly had off and on used that name whenever she felt like being mean and belittling to Maddie. Her words showed her sister's true inner spite. Maddie could tell the bedwetting was really getting to Holly for her to have said this, as she was never usually this unhappy and bad-tempered. Mum was now in total disbelief that her eldest daughter had suddenly now out of nowhere managed to wet her bed 6 nights in a row. The doctor had even said there was no obvious reason for the accidents and that hopefully it would just pass. She spoke to Holly about it before she had left for college, and explained that her bedding and pajamas were being completely ruined and that her room would soon start smelling of pee, which Maddie would surely eventually notice. Holly tried to avoid the conversation as it was something she couldn't quite believe she was having to discuss with her mother at her age. After a short talk, Mum said that she would speak to her further about it later on that night. Whilst at college, Holly struggled to focus on her classes. She tried to put the inevitable embarrassing talk she would have with her mother out of her mind. She felt like some little kid that was going to be told off for wetting the bed, except she was no longer a little kid, but a mature, beautiful, and intelligent 18-year-old college student, looking to get the grades that would get her a place for next year at one of the top universities in the country. The accidents were really starting to bother her the longer they went on. A couple of her friends even asked her what was up, as they thought she hadn't been acting herself the last few days. She certainly had no intention of telling them what was up. Holly felt as if she'd literally rather die than any of them find out she had been wetting the bed. That evening, it was 10 p.m. and the family were all sat in the lounge either watching TV or sat using an iPad as they usually did of an evening. Mum disappeared upstairs, and just a couple of minutes after, Holly did as well, which Maddie thought was a little strange. Maddie decided to creep upstairs to see why they had both gone up there. Just as she was near the top of the stairs, she saw Mum come out of her bedroom and go into Holly's room. She noticed she had a bag with her. Mum hadn't seen her as the area where the stairs were was dark. Maddie then crept up to her big sister's door and listened in. "Mum, please no. I'm sorry darling, but this is the only solution. I'm not taking no for an answer. If you put up a fight you'll risk Maddie hearing what's going on, so I suggest you just lie back and let me get on with it." Knowing that putting up a fight would risk her sister hearing, Holly realized she had no choice and gave in. "Just lie back on the bed, love, and let me do it." "Mum, please can't I do it? This is really embarrassing." "Surely not," Maddie thought as she excitedly listened in. She could hear a lot of rustling. "No sweetie, because it needs to be taped on properly so it doesn't leak onto the bed." "No freaking way though, Maddie." This comment had brought a massive grin to Maddie's face, as she knew it could now only mean one thing: Diapers. Mum had clearly become fed up with Holly continuing to soak her bed and had obviously decided there was now only one solution: to put Holly back in diapers. Her usually confident, beautiful, and popular college-aged sister had now been reduced to being changed for bed like a baby. All because of Maddie's cruel trick. She couldn't believe she had managed this in just 6 days. Her older sister wearing diapers would literally be beyond her wildest dreams. She imagined how devastating this would be for Holly at her age. It hadn't even crossed her mind that Mum would do this to her big sister. The plastic sheet was like all her Christmases had come at once, but Holly being back in diapers like a baby would be beyond the most amazing thing she could possibly ask for. To Maddie, this really was absolutely perfect. She couldn't have asked for a better outcome. She knew that all she needed to do now was make sure that Holly's first night in a diaper didn't end dry. Fine, just hurry up in case Maddie comes upstairs. I really don't want her finding out. After a bit more rustling and taping, it sounded like Mum had finished the job of changing her oldest daughter into her first diaper since she was 2. Okay darling, it's all taped up now, if you want to stand up and see how it feels. Holly slowly got up and began feeling her new underwear. Mum, it's so thick, I can't wear this or Maddie will notice. It's so loud when I walk. It isn't as loud as you think, love. Put your pajamas on and I bet no one could even tell you're wearing it. Holly put on her pajama pants. Pulling them up, she struggled to get them over the bulkiness of the diaper. She had to kind of stick her bum out and wriggle from side to side to get them up fully. See, there we go sweetie, it's completely hidden under those. Can't you get me something thinner to wear, Mum? Sorry sweetie, but judging by how wet your bed has been most mornings, anything thinner would risk it leaking onto the bed and ruining your bedding. I can hear it crinkling every time I move though, said a clearly upset Holly. Trust me Holly, no one will notice. It's just a temporary thing, love, I'm sure. If the problem passes, which I'm sure it will, and you stay dry for a few nights, then you can stop wearing them. Maddie couldn't help but snigger. A few nights, hey, we'll see about that. Holly, now feeling over the moon. She quickly moved off back downstairs before she was seen. There was no going back now. This whole situation was music to her ears, hearing how humiliated Holly was feeling. Normally Holly's concerns would be whether her makeup looked right or her hair was okay, but not tonight. Her only concern tonight was about whether the thick diaper she had been forced to wear to bed due to her heavy bedwetting was noticeable under her cute pajamas. After her humiliation was complete, Holly made her way across the hall and into the bathroom, feeling totally distraught and as if her life was now over. This really can't be fucking happening, she thought to herself. 18 years old, and here she was stood there having just been changed into a diaper for bed by her mum like some unpotty trained little kid. Holly refused to accept it. She was a mature, beautiful, and intelligent girl, but deep down she knew that after the events of the last 6 nights, the truth of it was that she was actually in dire need of the extra absorbent adult-sized diaper that was now tightly strapped around her butt. So many thoughts went through her head. What would her friends think? How could she ever keep this hidden from Maddie? She couldn't even contemplate her life if she ever found out about this. As she walked, she noticed it almost felt like it made her waddle, as it was so unbelievably thick it forced her legs apart. Holly locked the bathroom door, and tried to hold herself back from crying as she came to terms with her current predicament. Staring at herself in the mirror, noticing her cheeks were now glowing a deep shade of red, she started observing her butt from every angle. She could see the diaper definitely made her butt look bigger and kind of made it a weird shape. She tried hard to convince herself that if she was careful Maddie would probably not notice, and that all she needed was to stay dry for a few nights and this whole thing would soon be a thing of the past. Mustering up the courage, Holly headed out of the bathroom and back downstairs, walking slightly hesitantly as she was so conscious of the rustling diaper. She prayed to God Maddie wouldn't notice anything was up. She sat herself down in her usual spot, thankful that Maddie had continued to stare at her iPad screen and didn't appear to have noticed anything was out of the ordinary. Maddie had opted to pretend she had no idea about Holly's predicament, keeping her head down and ignoring her sister's crinkling backside as she came in and sat down on the settee. On the inside, however, was a different story. Maddie felt tonight could be a massive turning point in her life. She mentally, at this moment, felt as if she was no longer completely inferior to her sister. In her eyes, Holly was no longer the pretty, intelligent and popular girl. What she was now was no more than an 18-year-old diaper-wearing bedwetter. Holly felt utterly ashamed having to sit near her far younger sister whilst wearing the same underwear as a baby. Why the fuck did this have to happen to me, she thought to herself. The thing that worried Holly was that, God forbid this bedwetting thing didn't stop, she would have to go through this every single night, with the constant fear of her secret being found out by her younger sibling. That was one thing she really couldn't deal with, the thought of Maddie ever finding out about this. She desperately hoped that this whole problem would be no more than a short-term thing. Holly just couldn't understand how this was happening. She had never wet the bed in her life, and then out of nowhere she had now woken up to wet sheets 6 nights in a row. She convinced herself that although the doctor had said there was nothing wrong with her, that maybe she had something he hadn't picked up on, like a bladder infection which would eventually pass, and that the accidents would stop with that. Maddie thought back to the argument the other day. She couldn't believe just 6 days ago Holly was the perfect girl in every way, sleeping with all the best-looking guys at her college. Now she had been reduced to having the same bedtime routine as a baby, which involved sleeping on a plastic sheet and being changed into a disposable diaper at night by her mom. She no longer felt in any way jealous of her big sister. Holly now had a secret that would completely ruin her if anyone ever found out, and Maddie loved it. That night, lying in bed, Holly couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned for what seemed like hours, unable to ignore the bulk of the thick diaper between her legs. God, this stupid thing is so uncomfortable, she cursed to herself. Lying there thinking about her current situation, Holly started to feel upset and overcome with emotion. She felt tears well up in her eyes, and unable to hold back, she began uncontrollably crying, which made her feel even more of a baby than she was feeling already. She tried to stay as still as possible, as every movement she made reminded her of her predicament by causing either the plastic sheet to rustle or her diaper to crinkle. Eventually managing to relax, Holly fell asleep. It was midnight. Keeping herself awake, Maddie had prepared to do her cruel trick again tonight. She had debated whether she had gone too far, but then remembered Holly's cruel words. Looking at her phone, she saw it was now 1 a.m. Quietly making her way to Holly's bedroom, hearing her sister was asleep, she gently slid her big sister's hand from under the covers and placed it in the bowl of warm water. She soon heard a hissing noise which sounded louder than usual. She knew this was because it was not the sound of Holly's pee soaking her cute knickers, but the sound of Holly's pee hitting the thick padding of her new underwear, her diaper. Oh dear, did the little baby have an accident in her diaper, muttered Maddie, unable to hold a big grin from her face as she left Holly's bedroom and went to bed herself. In the morning, as Holly came around from her slumber, it took her a few moments to wake up enough to remember the embarrassing events of the past week. These thoughts made the 18-year-old quickly slide her hands under the duvet and check her bed sheets for any sign of wetness, which to her surprise seemed to be dry as she felt around under her butt. She thought that maybe this would signal the end of her nighttime troubles. But she then became aware of something that had slipped her half-asleep mind. Her hopes were quickly dashed as she threw back to the bulky diaper her mom had put on her last night. Putting her hands down the front of her pajamas, her hopes were soon dashed. The huge bulk between her legs was warm and squishy, meaning yet again she had peed herself in her sleep. Maddie decided that there was no going back now, so she continued the hand in hot water prank every night, ensuring her sister would wake up to a soaking wet diaper every morning. Over the coming weeks, Maddie noticed a pattern, that every night Holly and Mum would disappear upstairs at some point during the evening. On returning, Holly always seemed to stay fairly still, as if to avoid drawing any attention to herself. Some nights she didn't even bother coming back down, instead opting to stay in her room watching Netflix. Maddie could tell though that her sister had a diaper on, as it made her butt look bigger and there was a slightly noticeable crinkling whenever she moved. It made Maddie laugh that her mature sister now had this embarrassing nighttime routine. To Maddie, seeing her sister sat there knowing full well what she was wearing under her pajamas was just perfect. To Holly, the events of the past few weeks were literally her worst nightmare. She just couldn't believe she had all of a sudden developed this humiliating problem. Trying to keep it from her friends was proving extremely difficult for her. It was having a huge effect on her normally buoyant social life. After nights out, she would now always make an excuse to go home so she could avoid dealing with staying over at anyone's house. One night she actually went back to some guy's house that she'd met in a nightclub. She had sex with him before keeping herself awake and waiting for him to fall asleep, at which point she got up and left. She certainly didn't want to deal with the embarrassment of wetting his bed and him telling all his mates about it, and there was no way she was going to carry around a diaper in her handbag in case she stayed at someone's house. One night Maddie went into Holly's room to do the hot water prank. She was a little later this time. She wanted to see it with her own eyes that she had actually reduced her college-aged big sister to wearing a diaper to bed every night, so she decided to gently pull back the covers to GE. Holly was on her side and Maddie could see the diaper peeking out of her pajamas, which made her smile. She gently slipped her hand down the back of her pajamas. Feeling the diaper, she couldn't believe just how thick it was. Mum had clearly taken no chances when choosing Holly's new bedtime underwear. She obviously had little faith in her 18-year-old daughter's ability to keep her bed dry, with good reason. She then noticed something that surprised her. The further she reached towards the bottom, it seemed to get more warm, and felt kind of mushy. She realized this meant Holly had already wet her diaper, without her hand being placed in warm water. She suddenly thought, had she over the course of the last few weeks trained Holly into becoming a bedwetter, had she trained her older sister's body to pee in her sleep by making her wet herself so many times? Over the course of the next week she only did the prank once. What she did instead was go in and check Holly's diaper every night at 3 a.m. She found that on 6 out of the 7 nights Holly had already used her diaper, and on the night she was dry at 3 a.m. that was the one night that Maddie did the prank. She couldn't believe it. She had somehow managed to turn her perfect older sister into a chronic bedwetter, that was now totally reliant on wearing a thick adult diaper to bed to prevent her soaking her sheets. This realization brought great pleasure to Maddie, knowing it wasn't now the prank that was making Holly wet the bed each night. She no longer needed that. Her big sister was now an actual bedwetter. Maddie loved the thought that because of her cruel trick Holly was likely no closer to being out of diapers at night than a baby. In fact, a baby or toddler would probably have a better chance of keeping its bed dry. Holly was totally fed up. She had endured the embarrassment of having tests done and seeing countless specialists. All she was told was that there was nothing wrong physically and they don't know what's causing it. All she knew was that she kept having this same weird dream. A flashback to last night. Holly was sound asleep in bed. It was like she was floating. She felt totally at ease drifting around in endless crystal clear, beautifully calm ocean water. As time passed she slowly started to fall below the surface, the lovely warmth of the water engulfing her as she gently submerged. The heat from the water felt extremely relaxing as she let her body follow the natural current of the water. A gentle voice repeated the word relax, relax. She could then see what looked like a toilet in the distance, but before even attempting to get there she felt any tension in her body disappear as she lied in the comfortable warmth of the ocean. Eventually she began to rise back to the surface of the water where she began feeling a little colder. Still asleep, Holly hadn't so much as stirred. What the beautiful college girl had done however during her relaxed state was empty her bladder into her now rather swollen and warm diaper. One evening Mum and Dad had gone out to eat. Maddie had observed that Mum had gone upstairs with Holly just before they left at 7:30, which she could only assume meant one thing: changing time. Meaning Holly would be spending a lot longer than usual in her diaper, and unusually the girls would be left on their own. Holly had protested about being changed at such an early time in the evening, but Mum had given her no option, stating that they would be back very late and that she would likely be in bed by then. Maddie had decided to invite a friend, Tara, over for the evening. Tara arrived shortly after Mum and Dad had left. Holly hadn't seemed all that pleased to have someone else in the house, which to Maddie was understandable when she was 3 years younger than Holly, and yet Holly was the one who was hiding a diaper under her pajamas. Everyone was sat in the lounge. Between the three of them they tried to pick a film to watch. Maddie and Tara wanted to watch The Hangover and Holly wanted to watch Anchorman 2. Maddie announced that it was 2 against 1, grabbing the remote she put on The Hangover, which Holly wasn't very pleased about. That's not fair. Yet it is, that's how it works. Shut up Maddie, that's just immature, snapped Holly. What Maddie felt like saying in response was, I'll tell you what's immature, Holly. Being 18 years old and still having to wear diapers cause you can't stop pissing the bed, but she thought better of it. It took all of her might to hold herself back from outing her sister as a bedwetter right there in front of her friend. They settled down and watched the film. Towards the end of the film Maddie noticed Holly holding her stomach on and off. She wondered if she might soon need to use the bathroom. As soon as the film ended Maddie went upstairs, took her pajamas and went into the bathroom, knowing if Holly needed the bathroom she would have to wait until she came out. Taking her time she got undressed and proceeded to have a nice long shower. Not long after she had gone in the bathroom Holly started banging on the door. Maddie, will you please hurry up, I really need to use the toilet. I'll just be a few minutes, I'm taking a quick shower. For God's sake just hurry up. Maddie could hear the desperation in her sister's voice, but continued to enjoy her nice hot shower. By now Tara had heard what was going on and she was now stood watching Holly smiling at the older girl's struggle. She discreetly got her phone out and recorded Holly's struggle. Maddie took her time. She washed her hair twice and then conditioned it, not in any rush, as she wondered if Holly would save herself from embarrassment and hold on. Holly kept banging on the door whilst jumping about, trying not to humiliate herself. Eventually, Maddie had finished. She got herself into her pajamas before finally opening the door. As she opened the door it looked as if it might be too late for Holly. She was bent forward with one hand clutching her stomach and the other hand holding her butt. Tara noticed something weird sticking out of her pajamas as she bent forward. Running up to her she tugged at her pajama pants, pulling them down around her ankles, leaving her stunned. Oh my God, she's wearing a fucking diaper. Holly, too preoccupied to stop Tara exposing her, then lifted her head as she let out a big gasp as both girls stood watching in complete shock as the 18-year-old uncontrollably lost control of her bowels and began messing her exposed diaper right before their eyes. The girls were both totally stunned at what they had just seen, and the best part of all was that they had the whole thing recorded. Holly ran off crying into her bedroom with her massive sagging diaper still on full display as she slammed her door behind her. Tara and Maddie just looked at each other and burst into fits of laughter. Boy, were they going to have some fun with this. A short while later they went up to Holly's door. "Oh Holly, can we come in and have a little chat with you?" Maddie and her older sister Holly sat at the dinner table eating supper with their parents as they did every evening. As seemed usual in their home, Holly liked to dominate the conversation, telling their parents about her day at school and how well she was doing in every class. "So Mum, today in biology Mr. Hartford said I'm on track for one of the best marks he's seen on our individual coursework." "Oh, that's great, sweetie, I'm really pleased for you," replied Mum, seemingly proud of her daughter. "And can you believe it, in the child care course they even had these massive baby dolls and they made us show that we knew how to change a diaper. I mean, why do they need to teach us how to change diapers, for God's sake?" "Well, you never know, love, it might come in handy one day, maybe if you have children of your own." As Holly carried on and on, Maddie found her boastfulness increasingly annoying. She had finally had enough and just couldn't help but say something. "Jesus, do you ever stop talking about yourself, Holly? I'm fed up with you going on and on about how amazing you are at everything." "Maddie, don't be so disrespectful and rude to your sister. All she's doing is telling us about her day." "Yeah, Maddie, what the hell is wrong with you? Are you're jealous of me or something?" "That's right, Mum, side with her, of course, she's too perfect to ever do anything wrong." "Stop being such an immature little brat, Maddie. You're 15 years old, not 5, for God's sake. You're acting like a baby," replied Mum angrily at her daughter's immaturity. With that, Maddie ran off up to her room in floods of tears, feeling utterly worthless and inferior at how her life was compared to her sister. 18-year-old Holly had always been seen by everyone as the perfect girl, regularly achieving higher grades than Maddie and having a much larger group of friends thanks to her good looks and outgoing personality. But Maddie didn't see it this way. To her, she saw Holly as boastful and full of herself, always going on about how she had done this or done that. Maddie felt fed up with living in her sister's shadow. After Maddie's little outburst, she had gone up to her room on her bed to sulk. Lying there, she felt angry at Holly's arrogant response and how Mum had even defended her. These thoughts stirred in her mind as she laid there on her bed feeling worthless and upset, and soon, despite it only being 6:30 p.m., she drifted off to sleep. She awoke a few hours later needing to pee. Looking at the clock, she was shocked to see it was now 2 a.m. and that she had slept through the whole evening. Due to it now being so late, everyone else had gone to bed. She got up and quietly made her way to the bathroom. As she walked past her sister's room, she noticed her door was slightly open and she could hear Holly was asleep. She thought about the evening's events and how much she hated her big sister when suddenly an idea popped into her head. Part of her was saying it was a mean, nasty thing even to think about doing. The other part of her remembered what had happened earlier in the evening, and how much hatred she currently felt towards Holly. She quietly went downstairs to the kitchen and got a large plastic bowl, which she then filled with warm water from the kitchen tap. Maddie then made her way back upstairs and very slowly snuck into her sister's bedroom, observing that Holly appeared to be in quite a deep sleep. She put the bowl down next to her bed and gently lifted Holly's hand, being careful not to wake her, and placed it in the warm water. She stood and waited. After about 2 minutes she was about to give up, having convinced herself it was a stupid idea that would never work, when all of a sudden she thought she could hear a faint noise. She listened closely as she began hearing a hissing sound from under the sheets which got increasingly louder. Gently lifting the duvet, her jaw dropped. She saw that Holly's pajamas were now soaking wet and her bed was soaked. She couldn't believe it, her trick had actually worked. She had somehow made big mature Holly pee her bed like a baby. Now who's acting like the baby? Not quite so perfect now, are you? Maddie thought to herself. She left the room with a massive grin on her face, not quite able to believe that she had just somehow made her 18-year-old sister have a bedwetting accident.